My name is Declan Hurley. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Chicago Thinker, which is UChicago's conservative and libertarian student publication. I'm here today with Professor Rachel Fulton Brown, who's a professor here at the University of Chicago, and we're going to be discussing her upcoming Christian graphic novel, Draco Alchemicus. She's been a professor at UChicago since 1994. She received her Bachelor's of Arts in History and Religious Studies from Rice in 1986. Her diploma in historical studies from Cambridge in 1987, her PhD from Columbia in 1994, also in history. She signed on to the UChicago faculty as an assistant professor of history in 1994 and was promoted to an associate professorship in 2002. Her field studies are the history of Christianity, medieval European history and liturgy, the cult of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and scriptural exegesis. She's published, among many other articles and books, Mary and the Art of Prayer via the Columbia University Press. This book came out in hardcover in 2017 and paperback in 2019. She's done 2 epic poems with the Dragon Common Room. These are Centrism Games and Aurora Borealis. I bet I just butchered that pronunciation. And Professor Fulton Brown blogs at Fencing Bear at Prayer. I'm also joined by Matthew Heck, who's a member of the Chicago Thinker Alumni Advisory Board. Matthew's a 2022 graduate of UChicago. He studied history and public policy. I'm so happy to be with both of you today. And my first question for Professor Fulton Brown is, what is it like to be a Christian, an open Christian, at a secular research institution like UChicago? And to paraphrase your May 30th, 2023 blog post, which I will link and encourage everybody to read, how did your experiences trying to show non-believers the light convince you to produce a Christian graphic novel?
Oh, well, thank you for having me, and thank you for that lovely introduction. I've written a lot of books, and every book that I'm writing is always my favorite book at the time, and so this one's my favorite. But they've all been building together, right? The Mary and the Art of Prayer and Aurora Borealis and Draco Alchemicus are all part of a long-range project of speaking as a Christian in both the academy and the public sphere. And you asked me, Declan, what is it like being a Christian in the secular academy? It's like being a Christian anywhere else. We live in the world, which we are not of. And sometimes Christians worry about, it's like, well, we should go, make our own spaces. And it's like, well, we could do that in monasteries, but those are not in the world. In the medieval understanding, when you go into the monastery, you're living the life of the angels. You're out of the world. Insofar as we, are in history and in, the city of, I say the world, right? Because it is the world. It's also the city of Satan, because Satan's the Lord of the world. We are at war. And, in the monastic tradition, that warfare is prayer and meditation and art and liturgy. And therefore, that is what I'm sort of bringing into the academy, the study of the monastic tradition, the study of the artistic tradition. And my recent projects in the poetry that we're going to be talking about are of that practice, right? They're of this monastic desire to tell Christ's story in a way that the world can hear it. You asked me about the other thing. Oh, so the blog post you mentioned is on Christian dragons. And that is, hopefully, for those of you who are deeply embedded in the study of Christian catechesis, a reference to Augustine of Hippo's On Christian Doctrine, the sort of joke being on Christian dragons, right? And the problem that we have as Christians always is communicating our understanding of being in the story with those who don't see our perspective yet. And I say that this is a historical perspective, this is a faith perspective, but dragons, for me, in my scholarly work and in this imaginative work, are the sign of our ability to imagine ourselves into the story. And I hope we're going to be able to unpack that and talk about it. But that's what that blog post is pointing to. It's the Augustinian desire to show people the story that we find ourselves in.
And just thinking to your time in the academy, have you ever had a productive conversation with a non-Christian, your colleague, your student, that's led to a conversion, that's led to the opening of their heart? Has that type of conversation happened in your time in the academy?
Um, so conversion happens very quietly most of the time, and I think everything that I've talked about over 30 some years in the academy has participated in this storytelling. I am aware that people I have credited me with showing up at Calvert House, for example, on campus. And I certainly in my online engagements have had people thank me for my voice and my storytelling. Um, I would never take credit for a conversion. That's the spirit. What I simply hope to do is model what it's like to be in faith and bring that joy and hope to people, so that if they're thinking about wondering what it means to be a Christian, I'm trying to show them that, and then the spirit will work on their understanding.
That's a lovely mission. Matthew, did you have anything you'd like to ask Professor Fulton Brown at this juncture?
Not yet.
Not yet.
I'll let you keep asking questions. You're doing a good job so far. Thank you for the introduction.
Oh, absolutely. My second question for the good professor here is, can you let us in on the plot of this upcoming 5-act graphic novel? And I'd love to hear about the dragons and and what precisely you mean about these dragons and how the dragons feature in your story.
Okay, so the title is Draco Alchemicus, which is translated into the vulgar tongue, as it were, the alchemical dragon. Alchemy is, most people know it as either the scientific predecessor to chemistry, or the study of magical transformations. And in our understanding, Draco Alchemicus, it's obviously both. It's the history of modernity from the 16th century, roughly, with the origins of both science and, I think, sort of magical thinking of a spiritual sort. And the plot of the story is the way in which our dragon slayer enters into that maelstrom of magic and science and slays the dragon. Now, if you go to our website at dragoncommonroom.com, we have some of the illustrations for the story, and the cover image we have is, so there's a city gate, and there's the dragon sort of soaring above the city, looking at itself in a great crystal spire. And there's a path going into that city, and on the path you see from behind the figure of our dragon slayer, who's about to enter into the city and take on this quest. If you are well versed in Christian iconography, you will recognize that as the Ecce Homo figure from one of the famous 19th century paintings of Christ being shown to the people by Pilate. Here's your king, right? So he's got the robe on and is preparing himself to go into battle. Our story is to show in fantasy fashion what it means for Christ to enter into our imagining, into our science, into the problem of our addictions to glamour and sin in the world. And the dragon is all of those things. So the first thing that we had to figure out how to do in the story was make the dragon seductive. And that opening picture was one of our first, sort of translations of our project into visual form, right? It's like, this dragon has to be magnificent and beautiful and seductive, and it's clearly so seductive it seduces itself, looking in the mirror of the tower. And that is, for our purposes in the allegory, the image of modernity. It's become entranced with its own power and beauty and magic, and we need, by way of this epic, to show you how to break that seduction. I can tell you more about the original plot, but just if you have questions about that.
Just to put the dragon in more concrete terms, can you talk about some of the dragons that academia has been confronted with over the past 5 years?
Well, the specific, this is okay. So with the story about the Draco Alchemicus, the problem is this is a 500-year-old story, at least, right? Modernity is not something that got its grips on us in the last 5 years or 3 years or even 100 years, although we've had forms of it intensifying recently. The major dragon that we are dealing with in modernity is our love affair with science. And the Draco Alchemicus, we say in our website that we're modeling the exercise, the art on Edmund Spenser's Fairy Queen, which, if you know Elizabethan literature, is this great dragon. The book one is the great dragon killing story. The Red Cross Knight takes on the dragon. So there's dragon in fantasy, but we also are modeling it on Francis Bacon's New Atlantis, which is another kind of fantasy story. But the New Atlantis story is set in this island in the Pacific, and it's inhabited by a people of they have a Solomonic priesthood who oversees their research institutions. And Bacon wrote that as an allegory. What he wanted the new science to become, which was all these experimental institutions testing things like optics and cooking and electricity. And he's writing this in the early 17th century. And our sense of modernity is that it's been so seduced by both of these images, right? The Spenserian fairyland of the modern state, the Elizabethan sense of the queen herself as the overseer of England, plus this scientific fantasy. So what I see happening more recently in the last 5 years is continuation of this glamorization of we can through our medicine and our biological engineering and our state structured tyranny fix everything, right? And that's why we said with the COVID stuff and the mandates and the vaccines and everything, that is our dragon, right? It's the Draco Alchemicus of modern medicine, modern institutional hubris.
Very well put. Thank you. Matthew, just checking in if you have anything.
I guess I was kind of curious about the dragon, because the dragon, as I can tell, it doesn't really represent any single one issue. It's kind of it can represent a single kind of fault or fallacy in specific instances, but I think overall the concept of the dragon is kind of the sum of all evils and problems that are facing society, and not just like society, but humanity. And so I guess, could you kind of expound upon what the kind of different, I guess, temptations the dragon represents in this story and poses in this story?
Well, that's accurate. That I mean, so we're in we're working in Tolkien fashion. So this is not allegory, although I just said it was, but it is.
I caught that.
Showing you from within what the temptation of power is like. And so, I mean, that's one of the interesting things in the Lord of the Rings. Sauron is already, if you could see him, he has no body, right? But he's already terrifying to look at, as it were. But in the early phases of even Tolkien storytelling, Sauron is beautiful to look on, and that is one of the problems with sin. Is it doesn't start out horrific. It starts off as this just glamour of influence over other people, right? The Sauron's dragony element is the ring and the domination of other wills. You have to consent to that in a sense. You have to let the dragon draw you in. So the different kinds of sins that we're dealing with in the first act of the poem, which is the one that we have written already, it's like we're doing a fundraising campaign this summer to help pay for the artist. But as authors, the four of us that are working on the poem together, we've already written Act 1. And in Act 1, what you have is the opening scene is a casino. And our Dragon Slayer character, whose name is Damien, he's entered into the casino. He's got clothes on by the time he goes through the portal. And the first person he meets is Eliza Drake, who is representation of this kind of glamour and temptation. And she sort of guides him into saying, would you like to play a game? And the first encounter they have is with a couple who are there on their honeymoon, who are betting on the horse races. And you can already see it's like there's layers and layers of imagery that we've crafted into this, but you should be able to understand it's like you're betting on the horse races in a casino. And The couple is wanting certainty in wanting to win on their bet, right? So they first try to figure out it scientifically. They also do it sort of mythologically, and they win their first bet. And Eliza sort of shows up and says, "Oh, don't you want to guarantee a win?" And they're like, "Well, yeah, we could. We want to have a family. We want to get we want to be secure." So she says, "Well, I have this elixir that will guarantee it." And of course, once they take it, doesn't necessarily go very well, because that desire for control is the first step. What Eliza promises, and something quite simple. It's like, here, you can bet on these horses, and in the horse race, if you need to go into the story, that the horse race is also showing you sort of layers of the temptation, that it is itself a story based on the names of the horses. So the point at which she sort of gets them first is that it's all railroad themes, right? So it's like the Industrial Revolution coming in and promising you control over the environment, control over your communications, control over your fortune. And that I mean, it's like the first time you buy, for example, insurance. I've forgotten our horse names because we, it's like coming up with them, but you buy insurance, that's taking the elixir. You buy, a desire to control, your future in any way, you're already going to be worried about losing it. And the couple falls temptation to that. And then we're trying to show the rest, it's like with the rest of the characters from the first act, as they get tempted into desiring to play this game of participating in the magic.
Is that why it's bad? Is that why the desire for control and domination is bad? Because it creates kind of it starts the ball rolling down the hill, where it creates a cycle of temptation, an ever escalating temptation that leads to greater issues? Or is it bad in and of itself, in a way?
Well, that's the great mystery in Genesis, right? That the serpent, which is obviously what's going on in this scene, that the Adam and Eve are there in the garden, and they are meant to be taking care of the animals. It's like, be fruitful and multiply, and here's this garden. And then the serpent comes along and suggests, well, you could have control over it, right? You'd have knowledge of good and evil. You will now be like gods. And that, it's like, what's the first thing that happens in there? It's like, well, the first like lie that the serpent says is God lied to you. And the second is, you will be like gods. You will know things. And that seems to be, however you take that story as a historical description, it's clearly a description of humanity's condition, which is, we want certainty, we want the knowledge that we feel like we don't have immediate access to, and we're scared, right? So that the temptation plays off so many things. And what we want to do in the story is in a sort of whimsical, fantastic way, demonstrate the problem, which is how Christian catechesis should work. It's like, you show the problem that we are struggling with, and then Christ becomes, available as an answer to how do we fight our own failings. It's not that God set them on us. It's somehow we've fallen into it, and that falling into it is our great sorrow. And here Christ enters into all of this and demonstrates to us there's a way out.
So we've discussed at length in our private conversations and at thinker meetings the planets that you've featured in this this epic. Could you talk a bit about the role of the planets and their lapsing into temptation in the face of the dragon?
Yeah, so Declan's had my quiz in the background, right? It's like, so, it's like, you're going to get into the storytelling here. It's like, you're going to see yourself in this story, but also it's not just like a historical story. It's like, there is some time travel in our setup, but it's also, can you see yourself in the patterns of all of these influences and decisions and, desires that we are subjected to in being in the world. And in the second scene, so the first scene is this casino scene. In the second scene, we have a magician he's got this dove that he's going to do a magic trick with, and promises by way of the dove entry into this kind of dream world, that the dove dream will show you treasures, right? And he's inviting the audience, he's inviting members of the audience into this dream world, which is itself modeled on like the structure of the cosmos. And you get a little hint of that. I think on the website, we have a picture of the fountain. There's this fountain at the very beginning of the act that has embedded in it all of this symbolism of the Gospels and also the cosmos and things like that. And we realized in constructing this story, it's like, well, we had to like reincorporate what we put in that fountain symbolism. It's like, oh, well, we put an image of the cosmos up there. It's like the planets, right? And it's like, okay, wait. And then we started realizing, it's like the C.S. Lewis has a wonderful description in The Discarded Image of the way in which the pre-modern world thought of itself, that there's a macrocosm of the spheres, right, the planets, and a microcosm of humanity, and that in the old understanding of things, the planetary structure, the macrocosmos, influences the microcosmos, which is the basis of astrology, right? If the planets are moving in ways that you are then influenced in your own life and personality and things like that. Lewis puts this kind of understanding both into his Narnia books and into his space trilogy. So if you didn't realize it, you're actually already familiar with it. If you're familiar with the way in which, for example, there's a character of each of the books in the Narnia series of the planet that they're under the influence of. So Prince Caspian, for example, is Mars. And so it's both military and Sylvan. It's got forest imagery in it, right? So we're working in our story with an understanding of the cosmos that's the macro and micro. And we said, well, okay, so how are we going to pick the characters that we're going to put into this story? And we said, well, clearly they have to be, influencers, iconic, right? Which therefore gives us a clue to wait, the planets are influencing them. And this is also, sort of as a tease to tell you, we already believe in this kind of astrological effect on people because we're talking constantly about in the internet, worrying about the degree to which people are influencing each other by way of being iconic, right? So this should already, I'm not going to tell you, I made Declan and Perry guess all of them, just too much fun, but that we have characters in the act that are themselves influencers. And so we were saying, so if you're going to have an influencer that has the energy of, for example, Mars, who would you have? Or if you have the influencer of the energy of Venus, who would it be? Influencer of the energy of Jupiter, who would it be? And Declan knows the answer to all of these, so I'll make Matthew guess.
Oh, God.
If you were picking a character, right, that was going to have Jupiter sort of energy,
that was the one
in our
I didn't
world.
think of someone for.
Oh, okay. So did you think of one for Mars? Do you have one for that you would have for Mars?
Well, the problem is I thought of Kanye West for Mars, and then you said Venus, and I was like, oh, Kim Kardashian. I'm like, no, I can't just fill.
No, and see this.
I don't know enough celebrities to actually do a good fill-in for all of it, but
this was our writing project,
Mercury.
right? It was like which it's like which influencers fit which kind of energy, and which would be truly iconic for our culture, so that you could feel the effect of having that celebrity cast as one of our so it's what's interesting because the characters are not those people. They have their own names and they have their own sort of mythology behind them, but that we needed them to be iconic in our minds to have that sort of celebrity effect. So you have in fact picked one of our celebrities, but you didn't put it with the right planet.
Is Kanye Mercury?
Yes. Why?
Because he's mercurial.
Yes. And also, what's Mercury? And this is, if you know the Narnia stories.
I don't know the elemental symbolism of the planets.
Do you know the Narnia books?
Oh, Mercury's Mercury.
Mercury's Mercury.
I know some of the Narnia books.
The Mercury book is The Horse and His Boy.
Oh, okay. I've read like 90% of that. It's how would he relate to that?
So this is what I'm trying to show you. This is what the writing process was like and figuring out all of these things. So The Horse and His Boy is about language and communication and also twinning. And the Mercury character is mercurial. He's about art and communication and messengers, right? And the sort of all of our icons needed to be certain, significant, dangerous, obviously, because that kind of power in the world is very, very it's threatening, right? It's like Dionysian, right? Is it's like Dionysus and Apollo. You could have that feeling of what would it be like to have the gods descend with us? Not necessarily nice, right? It's like you should have lived a little terrifying. So Yay fit very well with Mercury because it's got this terrifying verbal effect, efficacy, and musical sort of energy and things like that.
My guess for Jupiter, I'd say they're Elon Musk or Donald Trump, because they have sort of the massive influence inside of, they're kind of above even all the other influential characters.
Yes, it's one of them.
Donald Trump is too easy. It's got to be Elon Musk. Okay, it's Donald Trump.
Yes. Anyway, so we went through this process, and a lot of the process of our writing is figuring out it's like we wanted to say, look, you're in this story. So if we're going to make this whimsical, fantastical story, how do we demonstrate to you that you're in this realm of battling energies? Yeah.
Wait, is Pluto Elon Musk? Just riches, cold, distant.
Well, so it's the planets are in the Ptolemaic system, so there's no Pluto.
No, what? Yeah, no, Uranus.
Actually, but if we went for it, it's like, so the acts are going to have to, right now, casino is this act, right? It's got the casino, the horse races, and the magic show, which elicits the planetary characters. And then we've started working on Act 2, which is set in, we said it's the court. It's set in an Elizabethan tea party. And there's going to be some storytelling and such like that. And the planets are all going to have to like manifest their own role and energy, but also their historicity in the sense of how far back this kind of influence goes. Act 3 is going to be in a market, which is playing out in the steampunk. The different acts have different sort of costume character feel to them, and the Act 2 is Elizabethan, Act 3 is steampunk. Act 4 is going to be Commedia dell'arte, which is carnival, and the sort of whatever happens in Act 2, Act 3 with the market and the problem of the like actual engagement with the dragon is going to play out in the carnival, and then Act 5 is hopefully the happy resolution in the wedding, which is where all comedy ends, with a wedding.
I was going to say that.
And fertility. It's a comedy, but it's a horror comedy, right? Because you have to get through the sort of struggle with how do you defeat this glamour.
It's a tragic comedy.
Yes. So it's got a crucifixion in it, but exactly how we have actually figured out most of this, but in our writing process, we keep figuring out new elements of the particulars. So to say, we know that Damien has to defeat the dragon, and he's got some supporting characters of the dog and the dove. And we know how they're going to operate, but a lot of what we have to be able to show is the degree to which these planets, these influencers also get caught up in it, and they are both destroyed and redeemed in the process.
When you've gone through a very careful analysis of how intellectually we are all taught up in sort of this astrology, but from just watching videos of common people on the street, people are just into astrology, just flat out. There are large swaths of the population that every day they get up and they read their horoscope, and Mercury's in retrograde, and so that means I'm going to behave like this. And so it almost has kind of the four senses, where historically it is true that like astrology is very popular today compared to the past, and then there's also the fact that it metaphorically resembles influencers, and then there's sort of, I haven't figured out the analogical yet, or the allegorical, but it has multiple layers, and I think that's why it will be a good image for the story.
I'm happy to. So you're speaking in code for most people. You realize when you want to explain what you just did.
Then explain I was going to ask you to explain. You know all the names of the books and the authors. I just know that there was some guy in the early 1900s that wrote a book called The Four Senses of Scripture, and that is his argument that in the medieval period there was a style of interpreting the Bible where it basically asserted that every verse has four meanings. There's a historical, which is just the events that are being narrated, like history, and then there's the metaphorical, which is kind of no, I should go with the allegorical. The allegorical is the moral meaning of the verse, and then the metaphorical is the that's the church militant, like what it means about the church for living Christians, and then there's the anagogical, which is kind of the church triumphant, which is what it says, what the verse says about kind of how, not the world, because the world would be destroyed in the apocalypse, but what's to come after the apocalypse.
Right. So
right?
yes, and that's what you've done, is saying that this is exactly what we're trying to do. You can tell Matthew's taking my classes. That we're trying to do with the
Clearly not. I messed up the Ptolemaic astronomy.
You didn't take the quadrivium, so that's okay.
Yes, I did.
Did you? Yes, of course you did. Golly, you took so many of my classes. I don't know where
you said you loved my essay.
Oh my gosh, now we're both embarrassed. Okay, so I can't remember what Matthew did because he did so many. I'm thinking about your poem that you're going to have to tell people about. It's saying that I actually did train you all in this, right? Yes, you're going to have to remind me. What did you do for your quadrivium project?
I wrote about shapes and the potential relationship that has to how proportions were perceived in cathedrals, because we were discussing cathedrals.
Yes, you were doing so now you're embarrassed because you don't remember the astronomy.
we were always reading all these people talking about cathedrals. We're saying, oh well, the proportions are in the cathedral, and it's kind of, I mean, yeah, like the transept is 2/3 the width of like the nave, the altar, and I don't know what the center square is called, but it's kind of not obvious how there's proportions everywhere. And so I argued that it's possible the way they drew the shapes had the proportions, not necessarily in the shapes themselves or their parts, but in the method that the shape was made. Because I actually discovered that if you use Augustine's perfect proportions, you can engineer how to make perfect like hexagons and octagons without knowing anything except the basic principles of how you make the other shapes. So it's kind of like
all of this feeds into our poetry, right? Because we also read in that class, we also read Augustine on music, which is basically meter, which is poetry.
Right? Well, that's where he talks about the proportions.
Right. Okay. So now I'm feeling embarrassed that I forgot that. The Ptolemaic. What were we talking? Oh, yes, the four senses of scripture. So that's daily Bach. It's the four senses of scripture, and the historic. Yes, the influencers are actually there in our lives now. The allegorical is in our poem, it's the Christological element, right? It's saying that this story is actually Christologic because you're trying to show you by way of this mystery what it meant for Christ to enter into history. So our Damien character enters into the story, and he has to become Christ-like, or he is Christ, but show what that looks like from within the story, because we kind of we forget that the Gospels are at this level of, I'm still embarrassed. Anyway, I don't like forgetting my students' own work. I mean, I'm never going to recover from that. Anyway, the moral is, which is, it's not the metaphorical is the allegorical. The moral is this problem of sin, right? What is to be caught up in these temptations and horrors. The anagogical is our major claim, which is it's through art that we rise to this level of contemplation, and that we are rising through seeing all the connections at all of these different levels, including the verbal and the mathematical, because poetry is in fact both verbal and mathematical. It's words and also numbered expressions, right? Because it's got meter. And that is what, in fact, in our culture, we often are missing, because we don't have the beauty, the goodness, and the truth lifting our hearts and minds to God. And that's what the anagogical is. It's the contemplation of heaven through the art. Have I done enough penance about being embarrassed that I forgot your project?
Yes, I was just thinking, because
Matthew took so many of my classes, I can't remember which ones he did. And now he won't be able to remember all the ones he did. So I can embarrass him by saying, name them all that went into being able to think about all of this stuff, right? That's how deep the medieval tradition is. It takes multiple classes to even scratch the surface.
Medieval England, trivium, quadrivium, Tolkien, writing Christian poetry. I think that's all 5. Should I do 6?
See, you're not sure either.
You aren't either, so you can't call me out on it.
I can't. So Declan's easy. He did one with me, but it encapsulated all.
How to Be Good.
Well,
One of the best classes I've taken at Chicago, and it covers virtue from 9 different bases of analysis. It's an amazing course. The Bible, the Talmud, the Confucian analyze everything, all the traditions of note. And I'm looking forward to taking Professor Fulton Brown's class on Christian mythology. I think it's going to be next spring.
oh,
Yeah.
I was talking with I forget her name. It was one of the students in the Trivium class. There were only 8 of us, so it's bad that I don't remember her name. But she and I were talking, and we were like, Fulton Brown should teach a class on, I guess, we were calling it like esoteric Christian teachings at the time. We didn't quite know what to call it, like kind of the more mystical Christian exegesis that you know so much about. And I just Christian mythology is a good, probably close to what we were thinking about. We didn't quite have the right term for it. I don't think esoteric is the right term. That's more, I think, a more Buddhist thought with that. But
well, so I did do something closer. It's one of the reasons I can't remember which classes Matthew took, because I teach too many different classes because I'm constantly trying to come at different problems from different perspectives. And part of what you're describing was in the Angels and Demons graduate class I taught this year, because there is the sort of mystical, contemplative, angelic hierarchy element. Christian mythology is meant to be more the introduction to the stories that we find ourselves in, and Draco Alchemicus is like a condensed diamond-like version of what is Christian mythology. What is it to find yourself within this world that is alive with resonances and patterns? And I mean, for example, in Act 2, which we've started working on, the characters at the end of Act 1 are taken through a portal, of course, and they land in a garden which has all of this symbolism in it. And it's been fun trying to figure out what's in the garden because we have so many choices. It's only meant to be like 10 stanzas, and so we have to like really condense it. And it's like, is it the bestiary world? Is it the mythology world? Is it monsters? What kind of monsters? And once you start pulling on one of these threads, you realize everything connects to everything else, which is the way medieval cosmology worked. But it's also highly structured. So it's not just anything goes. It's not, oh, well, this attaches to that, and this is, we have to figure out exactly what attaches to everything else. Yeah.
So if you go through Professor Fulton Brown's Works Cited, I think it'd be called, on her website, she has books by Chesterton. It's just expansive works cited list for this particular graphic novel. Could you tell us a little bit about your creative process? Are you going chapter by verse in the Bible, or are you just basing this off of the vast amount of reading you've done over the past 50 years? Is it just lingering in the back of your head, or are you going chapter and verse through the Bible and these various books that you've cited?
I think I'm older than 50, so I think there's more than that many years of reading, because I think I'm going back to fairy tales. Right. So the giant structure of the story is Genesis to Revelation. Hopefully, obviously, right? We go from creation to the wedding, the heavenly wedding. And therefore there is a great mythological structure in what we're doing, but the actual story structure, I said, it's the casino, it's the demonstration of sin, the sort of drawing into it. The court, which is each of the characters are going to tell a fairy story, right? They're going to get themselves into their own story world, which then will play out. We have to show that the Act 3 is going to be more in a like a labyrinth, right? It's like, how do we find ourselves trapped in this maze of resonances and understandings? Act 4 with the Commedia dell'arte is this play of stereotype characters from the 18th century, and like that's the, when you're in the carnival sort of mythological psychedelic trip fully, and then the wedding, right? So the structure of the story is the sort of deep structure that we are seeing in the fairy stories themselves. But the confusing part about it is this is actually the way the Bible works. We think of the Bible now in the order of the books that it's printed in, right? It's like, we've got the 5 books of the Torah, right? The 5 books of Moses, the history books, the Job and the wisdom books and Psalms, the prophets, and then the New Testament and so forth. But the sort of mythological structure of the whole Bible is in fact in all of these cross references and resonances between Genesis and Revelation. And there's out there on the web a very interesting sort of rainbow image of all of the ways in which the Gospels are constantly cross-referencing each other. That is also something of the story world we're trying to demonstrate with this poem. And it's in Christian mythology, in that course that you're going to be taking, Declan, that's one of the things I'm trying to show you all. It's if you're thinking biblically, you're thinking in constant cross references and allusions and imagery that's revealing itself more fully. So for example, in the opening of the poem, we have Damien, who's just been introduced as the man who is manifest through the pigeon cloud, which I can also unpack for you the imagery on that. But he sings a song that is to his love, right? And that song is meant to recall the Song of Songs, the book of the Bible, the Old Testament, which my first academic book is all about, right? It's the way in which medieval Christians read the Song of Songs, and that reading of the Song of Songs is the very basis of the Christian mystical tradition. It's all of this language of love and the dove and the reverence, the beauty of the bride and so forth. It's our process of writing is having to figure out how to activate all of that again for people, so that when you hear dove, you don't just hear the dove of Pentecost, you hear the dove of the Song of Songs, you hear the ways in which Mary, the Virgin Mary, is described in her liturgy as my dove, the perfect one. It's training in associations and patterns and resonances. And the major image that my poets and I have used for talking about this is the mosaic that we're living within, this mosaic of the internet and the imagery, but also the mosaic of the mosaic ark of the ark that Moses made, that is the image of Our Lady. That's what our writing process is like. And then we have to make it into metered rhyming stanzas.
Well, I think the way you just described it in the past 5 minutes, I could just copy and paste, and that would make for a wonderful article, the way you described it. But I'm gonna
That's good.
I'll dress it up a little bit. But so I know we're a little pressed for time, so I am gonna make the final question I have. So I noted, just looking at your website, this project is going to cost about $20,000 total, and you have an online contribution platform, and you've raised $6,240 so far. So could you tell us a bit about how you're raising money and how we can help you out?
Yeah, you very frankly, yes, we need the money. as we're
Are you
dragons.
sacrificing children to Moloch?
No, no, we just want your gold. So the work that we're doing as poets is this sort of monastic creative practice, but we also have an absolutely brilliant artist, Zeno Fraga, who is Portuguese. I actually had the great pleasure and joy of meeting him in person when I was effectively on pilgrimage at Fatima in November. He'd been in contact with me already because he does his own work in his website called Catholic Comics, where he's illustrating various saints' lives and meditations and so forth. And he got in touch with me about 1.5 years ago and said, "Oh," because I'd done some blog posts on comics and how they are an incarnational art. They're both visual and verbal. And he said, "I'm doing comics. How wonderful that you said that you're doing this Christian art." And I said, "You're hired," except for, we don't have any money. So he's been working with us for the last year and has been doing, the opening illustrations. He's illustrated a wonderful deck of cards that we're offering as part of our crowdfunding. It's one of the rewards. And he's, going to be working on the illustrations for Act 1. The money that we're raising primarily is to help support him as our artist. It's also to help with the publication of the books. Each act is a single book of 100 stanzas with 25 full-page iconic illustrations. His work is amazingly beautiful, and you can see how much, if I'm trying to describe to you the resonances and associations that are simply in the text, he's putting that into the art as well. It's wonderful having a Catholic artist who's working with us at this like deep level of what color should it be? What should these figures look like? What kinds of, models are we using for drawing the different scenes in the story. You can see a sample of the images he's already done for us on our website, and that's mainly what the expense is to help support him in our art. So it's taking us about a year per volume to write it. He's much quicker than that. So we budgeted each volume is about $4,000 for him to do the art and for us to print the books that are pre-ordered from us. So whatever we can get in this present fundraising campaign is very welcome, because it's going to help boost us in this first book, and be able to carry on writing and his drawing these pictures without us having to stop and do further campaigns. For this present campaign, it's running through June 20th. We have different funding levels that you can, help us with just this book. You can help us with the future books by supporting the all 5 volumes. We have some lovely backer rewards at different levels. One is, beyond getting the books, right, ahead of time from pre-sales. But we also have things like a color print that we can include. Our favorite right now is the decks of cards, right? It's like, so we're in a casino, right? So we made our own poker deck with face cards with our main characters and its own set of, symbolic pips, right? It's not ace, hearts, diamonds, clubs like a regular deck. It's our own special symbolic deck. We also have the opportunity to come on our live stream, Mosaic Arc, and talk with us more about our artistic process. And at the very top tier, in good medieval fashion, people can contribute to the book at the donor level, and therefore get themselves drawn into one of the scenes of the book. We actually have one donor has given us funding for a picture in the present book, so we have at least one donor portrait going into the story right now. But when we say enter the story, enter the myth, we is saying you can be a part of this story, find yourself in the story, and if you have the wherewithal and the desire to really support us in this art war that we're in, we'll draw you in the story.
So to donate, I just have to look up. Is it Kickstart? Kickstart is the website.
It's Kickstarter. So on our website, I've been told by marketing people that this is like a failure if you have to go through too many clicks. But on dragoncommonroom.com, we have right now, you get a pop-up and it takes you direct to the Kickstarter. Declan, if I can send you the link and you can put that Kickstarter link directly in, because it's like Kickstarter, Rachel Fulton Brown, Draco Alchemicus. It's a little hard to remember all of that. So dragoncommonroom.com, you get to the website and there's plenty of links to the Kickstarter from there as well.
And I'll make it easy for the viewers. If you look up Draco Alchemicus online, the Kickstarter comes right up. It's the second result. So it's incredibly convenient.
And I have this, look for this logo, right? The dragon gem, which I my artistic ambition is going bananas with this, right? It's like saying, if we could really raise enough money to like make this gem in gold, you know how cool that would be?
It'd be a good April Fool's joke, at least.
Yes.
Give $20,000 and you can get a cut diamond.
You'll buy me rubies. No, what you're doing is funding Christian art at a truly monastic level.
So well said. I just want to thank Professor Fulton Brown and Matthew Heck for joining us today to discuss Draco Alchemicus. This is going to be a 5-act Christian graphic novel. That's something I don't think we hear very often at the University of Chicago. And this is going to be a true work of art, a true work of Christian storytelling. And we are so thankful to have had this opportunity to talk with you for 45 minutes here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Declan. Thank you, Matthew.